Good evening, everybody. Hell's Unicorn here once again, and it seems that once again Keith Olbermann has been released from his duties at MSNBC, and this time for good. And I decided to take a couple of days to chew on this rather than jumping the gun again, just to make sure that this was actually a permanent deal, and it turns out that it is. Olbermann has resigned himself to defeat and is moving on, either to carry on his nonsense at some other news agency, or more likely to get into some other racket. The truth is that people like him never really go away. They just kind of move around a bit. And we can use the example of individuals such as Al Gore as proof of this. But I'm just going to give my thoughts on this matter because I think I might have a little bit of a different perspective on this than I think most of my conservative friends are. This is an area where we don't just necessarily deal with one side of politics, but we try to deal with the most salient points of it as it pertains to both sides, or better yet, all sides. Ergo, we seek the truth. And I think that everybody watching this video would agree with me that that is the principal aim, or better yet, it ought to be the aim of politics. It is the aim of us within the realm of politics, but it's not the aim of the majority, unfortunately. I have a link posted to an article that I am going to read in just a moment, but I'm just going to let you chew on a couple of points here before I get into it. Barack Obama is perhaps best known amongst those of us who knows what's going on within government spending for passing the largest government handout in the form of the Tarp Fund. This was originally the policy of the previous administration, but under Obama this policy was greatly expanded, and very large sums of monies were divvied out to different banks for the purposes of bailing them out for shoddy lending practices, which they were coerced in many cases into performing at the behest of woefully idealistic and stupid politicians such as Chris Dodd and Barney Frank. Now, the thing to understand is that the primary beneficiary of this TARP money was actually not a bank, or at least not a bank in the traditional sense. It was GE, General Electric. They got large sums of money from the TARP Fund, and they had the privilege of being exempt from most of the obligations that were placed on the other institutions, all of them banks, who also received this money. So we're left with a question here. We have a couple of degrees of separation here within financial terms. We have General Electric at the center of it, though. General Electric gets money from Barack Obama and other corrupt Democrat politicians, and General Electric owns MSNBC. You can check into this. This is a matter of fact. So essentially we have Obama, the politician, ready to divvy out monies to General Electric, and in turn General Electric is willing to play interference for the Obama administration vis-a-vis MSNBC, which is essentially a cheerleading agency for Barack Obama and the Democrats. Now, to be fair, you get the same line of political money going back and forth in a similar trifecta between many Republican neoconservatives and Fox News and the affiliate that is between the two, Clear Channel. Nonetheless, I think it more pertinent to focus specifically on this particular trifecta, since it is the one that we are currently suffering under. And so this article is taken from the Washington Post, and this was actually put up a little over a year and a half ago. The actual date for this is, it's definitely in 2009. The date is not really posted clearly here, unfortunately, but you can read it when you go to the link. I'm just going to read the first several paragraphs of this so you can get a general idea of what's going on here. General Electric, the world's largest industrial company, has quietly become the biggest beneficiary of one of the government's key rescue programs, for banks. At the same time, GE has avoided many of the restrictions facing other financial giants getting help from the government. The company did not initially qualify for the program, under which the government sought to unfreeze credit markets by guaranteeing debt sold by banking firms. But regulators soon loosened the eligibility requirements, in part because of behind-the-scenes appeals from GE. As a result, GE has joined major banks collectively, saving billions of dollars by raising money for their operations at low interest rates. Public records show that GE Capital, the company's massive financial arm, has issued nearly a quarter of the $340 billion in debt backed by the program, which is known as the Temporary Liquidity Guarantee Program, or TLGP. The government's actions have been powerful and helpful to the company. GE Chief Executive Jeffrey Immelt acknowledged in December. GE's financial arm is not classified as a bank. Rather, it worked its way into the rescue program by owning two relatively small Utah banking institutions, illustrating how the loopholes in the U.S. regulatory system are manifest in the government's historic intervention in the financial crisis. The Obama administration now wants to close such loopholes as it works to overhaul the financial system. The plan would reaffirm and strengthen the wall between banking and commerce, forcing companies like GE to essentially choose one or the other. We'd like to regulate companies according to what they do rather than what they call themselves or how they charter themselves, said Andrew Williams, a Treasury spokesman. GE's ability to live in the best of both worlds, capitalizing on the federal safety net while avoiding more rigorous regulation, existed well before last year's crisis because of its unusual corporate structure. Banking companies are regulated by the Federal Reserve and not allowed to engage in commerce, but federal law has allowed a small number of commercial companies to engage in banking under the lighter hand of the Office of Thrift Supervision. GE falls in the latter group because of its ownership of a Utah savings and loan. Unlike other major leaders participating in the debt guarantee program, such as Bank of America, Citigroup, and J.P. Morgan Chase, GE has never been subject to the Fed's stress test or its rules for limiting risk. Also, unlike firms that have received bailout money in the Troubled Assets Relief Program, or TARP, GE is not subject to restrictions such as limits on executive compensation. You guessed it, ladies and gentlemen, the executives at GE can at any time, and probably have, gifted themselves with very nice bonuses, probably for those beautiful and very expensive gold-plated jacuzzis that they've always wanted. And I'm going to stop there. In the time since this article was published, Barack Obama and the Democrats who ran Congress up until the previous election that took place just about a month and a half ago have done two things in order to solve this alleged problem that Barack Obama supposedly alluded to in this article, and those are Jack and shit. And it seems that Jack left town before I said that. But anyway, the fact of the matter is that even before Barack Obama assumed the presidency, we still had the hand of GE being closely involved in the goings-on within the Tarp Fund, and this is primarily due to Democrat control of both Congress and the Senate. Now, it took the complicity of the Bush administration, who I have long asserted is interchangeable with all of these neo-lib scum, just as all other neocons tend to be, except for the hawkish rhetoric. But this is largely a Democratic venture and will continue to be one. Now, how does Keith Olbermann's firing play into all of this? Well, it's very simple, really. The Democrats lost the election, and they lost bad. And by the looks of the current political landscape, they may well lose again in 2012, both in the presidency and the Senate. So what is GE to do when the party that they have been shilling for the past 4 to 6 years has suddenly found itself completely out of power? You do what any other good corporation does. you hedge your bets on the other side. And that's precisely what they're doing right now. For all intents and purposes, we will probably see a bit of an ideological shift at MSNBC in the coming months, probably. We'll probably get a few dissenting conservative voices on there, perhaps one or two in primetime slots. This actually happened years back with a short-lived show featuring Alan Keyes, of all people, actually. I believe the title of the show was Making Sense, and it was pitched as a rival 8 o'clock slot for that of The O'Reilly Factor, a show which I utterly loathe, but nonetheless the one that seems to be getting the most ratings. So we could well see something like this in the future, but one thing is certain. As far as MSNBC goes, things are definitely going to be changing, at least if General Electric wants its political cheerleading venture into the realm of the news media, the corporate news media, that is, to remain viable. And like all good corporate ventures, it probably will become that yet again. It'll have a much smaller audience than the Clear Channel creation that is Fox News, under the watchful eye, of course, of Rupert Murdoch, but it will nonetheless remain because General Electric, as proof positive by this article, has an inexhaustible amount of funds to dump into this failed news agency. In essence, what we can say is that although Keith Olbermann has gone bye-bye, MSNBC will still be with us, and likewise, I will continue in my perpetual apathy of that irrelevant and largely inconsequential news network. Take from it what you will. With prudence to myself and benevolence to all of you, good evening.